Hi, James Himm Mitchell here, and we are about to embark on another Look with the Lenormand, which is my viewer-requested reading series. This time, this is a question that's near and dear to my heart because I can totally relate to it. And so our question for this reading comes from Jonathan. Jonathan is a budding Lenormand card reader, and he is asking about his progression and advancement and his goal of becoming a skilled reader. So he wants to know, what do the cards have to say for him in terms of that? And I totally can relate to this question. I have been reading Lenormand, as most of you know, for about 9 months now. And what I periodically do is I check in with the cards, kind of like the way of like when, back when I was in school, which was some time ago, but when I was in school, we would get those report cards or progress reports. So for me, when I do a check-in, it's a progress report. So basically the question I'm always asking is like, well, what do I need to know? What do I need to do? What do I need to focus on that's going to help me become a better card reader? And so I do the same thing with tarot. So every now and then I'll ask the question and I'll put it to whatever oracle that I am wanting to become more proficient with is the oracle that I use. But these days I'm doing a lot of personal Lenormand card readings, and as well as ones for the viewers of my YouTube channel. But in the context of that, I'm always asking the Lenormand these days, how can I become a better reader? So I totally relate to Jonathan's question, which is one of the reasons why I kind of selected it, because I can relate to it so well. So I was going to do my typical line of 5, but I'm doing it with a little bit of a variation, and so I'm going to explain how that came about. There is a fellow YouTuber, her name is Kelly, and she is the head of The Truth and Story, and so I'm going to post a link to this particular video in the description box below. But I love Kelly, so she kind of enables me. She doesn't know that I label it like that, but she kind of enables me when it comes to purchasing Lenormand decks, and in this particular case it was the Mystical Kipper deck. So I don't know how many of you are familiar with Kipper cards. They're kind of similar to Lenormand, but also in many ways they're not. So I was watching a particular video from Kelly, and she was introducing this spread. It was focusing on Kipper cards because it came in the book that she got with Kipper cards, and the spread is called The Landing Strip. And as she was presenting it, I was looking at it going, I've seen that somewhere. And don't you had that feeling like, you've seen something, but you don't know where you've seen it? So I'm thinking, I'm like, I know I've seen that layout somewhere else. And then it dawned on me. I've seen it in this book, which is the companion guide to my Mystical Lenormand deck. And it's called The Landing Strip. And so I love this particular layout because it looks like this, visually speaking. You'll have the card that represents the person. So in this case, we're going to use the man card from Lenormand because it's going to represent Jonathan. And then you want to pick a card from the deck that's going to represent the goal or the idea or what you want to accomplish as the end result. And so in this particular case, when we're talking about the idea of doing readings and being a reader, I'm going to use the book because that's my go-to card for decks of cards, doing readings, and being a reader, because it plays on the idea of like reading a book. So, what other things do we read? And so one of those things, all of us who read cards, the book is for us because we're card readers. So, but then what you want to do is put those cards on opposite ends, and then there's going to be a line of anywhere from 3 to 7 cards between the person card and the goal card. And one of the reasons why I love this approach so much is because it brings me back to my life coaching days. I'm a professional life coach, and so one of the things that we do in conversations with clients as we're getting to understand what their goals are and kind of come up with a plan or a strategy to meet those goals. In the industry, we call that the gap. And so what it is that the cards that are in between the person card and the goal card is the gap. And so each card is going to help us either close or narrow that gap. So this is why I love the spread so much. But like I said, I'm going to, instead of posting or showing you from the book, I'll just put the link to Kelly's video in the description box, and you could watch that. And also, if you haven't checked out any of her videos, she's really great. She does all sorts of things about tarot, Lenormand, Kipper cards, which got me hooked into her. But she offers some great things on her channel, so if you haven't really checked out her channel, take some time to do that. And if you find that you like what you see there, consider subscribing to her. I think she's great. So, you know, I subscribe to her, and I always look forward to the stuff. And so, Kelly, if you're watching this, I'm giving you a shout out, hey. And I'm also going to ask you to kind of think about when you're going to get around to doing some more Kipper card videos. I'm just saying, okay? But I'm digressing. We're going to keep the focus on Jonathan and Jonathan's question. So, having said that, we're going to be using the man and the book as the person and the goal cards, and we're going to be looking at what does Jonathan need to know as the cards that are going to represent the gap in between. That's going to help him meet the goal of becoming a more skilled reader. And so now we're going to switch gears, keeping with the idea of a landing strip. We're going to switch gears and get to the table. So stay tuned. And here we are, cards on the table, and the spread, like I said in the previous segment, is called the landing strip. And it can consist of 3 to 7 cards, but me being who I am, you know that I love my line of 5. So here I've laid out 5 cards. And as I said in the previous clip, that the spread consists of the person card, and in this particular case, since Jonathan is male, I'm using the man card. And I should say here at this point, because I haven't introduced the deck yet, this is the Unforgettable Lenormand, and it's created by Terry Smith over at Divine Walks, and I will have a link to her video on YouTube that showcases all the cards in the deck in the description box below. And one of the things that I love about Terry's deck in particular is that it not only has one man card, not 2, but it has 3. So I'm going to show you all 3. This is the traditional one, and then she also has 2 alternate ones. And so when I first saw the video on YouTube, I was like, oh my gosh, I don't know when I get the deck which man I would let represent me. But in this particular case, it was easy to make the distinction because if you notice, these 2 alternate men are looking to their left, or it looks to us their left. It's their right, but it's our left. So they're facing the other way than the traditional man would be facing. This would be good if we were doing a reading about a same-sex couple, because I like to have one man facing one direction and the alternate man or his partner facing the other way. But in this particular case, I'm going with the traditional man, and this is why. It's because he's looking ahead, and the book, which I'm going to let represent the goal, and the goal here for Jonathan is becoming a more skilled Lenormand card reader. So since the man is facing the book, this is why I chose the traditional man. I'm all about direction these days, so I like it when I can see a person or an object or an animal facing one way or another. It kind of adds a nuance to the reading. So I particularly went with this pair because the man is actually facing the book. And so that would be Jonathan. If we let the man be Jonathan, then he's seeing his goal. It's in front of him. It's before him. So this way he can move toward it. And so as I said in the previous clip, the landing strip is a great spread because of my work as a coach. These are the steps that the Lenormand is offering Jonathan for his consideration that would help him improve his skill with reading the Lenormand. And so in my industry as a coach, we call it the gap. If this, Jonathan here as the man is the beginning point and the book here is the end point or the goal, then these are all the steps that he would need to take in between. We call that the gap. And so each card is going to help us close or narrow the gap. So having said that, this is the first card, and the thing about this spread too, normally I would go with the middle card when I do my line of 5, but here in this particular spread, we have to start with the card at the very end and then work our way towards the opposite end. So this being the first card, This is the letter. And so now the letter is a card that represents news, messages, paperwork, documentation. So for me, I find it very interesting that the letter comes after the man, because the way I read that as a pair is that the man receives messages. Usually, if I see the letter card, coming after the man card, it's about being on the receiving end of a message. And if it comes before on the left-hand side of the man, it can represent sending a message. And again, every reader reads things differently. This is just how I particularly read that pair. So I see this as Jonathan receiving messages. The other thing I see with the letter card, in terms of what he could do, because now remember, each card is going to be offering some kind of advice for Jonathan in terms of what he can do to become a more skilled reader. So I'm seeing this, and the first thing I'm seeing is the word documentation that I had mentioned earlier. So sometimes what I do is I take the words that we normally typically ascribed to the cards and saying, how can I tweak that word? So for me, I take documentation as documenting. So one of the things that would be helpful for Jonathan would be to actually document his readings. Keeping with the idea that yes, the book can represent becoming a skilled reader, which is his goal, but it can also represent the readings themselves that he's doing. So in this particular case, it would be documenting the readings that he receives, keeping with the order of the cards. So that's what I see with the letter. So now the next card here would be it's the moon card. Okay, this is great. Okay, so now the moon card represents things like career, vocation. It also represents recognition and reputation, and honoring something. So I would first see this as, for Jonathan, the pair of the letter and the moon being recognizing the messages that he's receiving. So it's about seeing what the messages are in the cards. The other thing would be, in terms of his becoming a Lenormand reader, what is it that he might want to be known for? Because this is about building a reputation. So is he seeing this as something that's going to be a part of his career? Or is he going to be doing it just because he enjoys it and he loves it? The moon can also be a card of creativity. So one of the things that he could do is some sort of creative writing, if we go with the idea that the letter is written correspondence. Then what type of writing could he do creatively that would help him kind of unlock meanings of the cards for him? So I would offer, the first thing I would say is the pair is saying recognizing the messages that he's receiving, but also what kind of creative approach could he take in terms of the actual writing of those messages. So that's the moon card. Now the next card here would be, or is, the stars. Okay, so now the stars represents inspiration, it represents guidance, it represents direction, it represents things becoming clear. The other thing that I see with the stars, it can represent online, or being online. So one of the things that may be helpful for Jonathan is what resources could he find online that would help him learn the cards even more than what he's doing now. The other thing about the stars card is that this could be, with the moon, guidance that leads to inspiration, reading the pair. So I'm seeing that. But again, I'm seeing this as, the inspiration to become more skilled. What would he be looking for that would help him stay inspired and motivated? And it's especially true when you are having challenging moments reading the cards. I call it, sometimes it's like the cards aren't saying anything to me. I'm not getting it. Like the cards have all of a sudden gone mute. And you're going to have those challenges as a reader. I know that's my experience. I don't know if it's a universal thing, but there are times when I just don't seem to get what the messages are. So in those moments when you feel like you're not getting it, it's like, remember what the inspiration was. Remember what is it that got you into reading the cards. And then as a coach, sometimes I see this as life coaching. So who could become Jonathan's coach, in that regard? And then the pair of the moon and the stars would be in that regard, because then if you're coaching with somebody, it's because you want some assistance meeting your goal. And so I sometimes see the stars as goals because we have to look up into the sky to see stars. And so symbolically that can represent a goal or an ideal for me. So the pair could be honoring the goal or honoring the ideal in that regard, keeping with the moon and the stars. So now the next card in the line is the ship. Oh, this is fantastic. Okay, so the ship, we all know, can represent travel and being on a journey. Sometimes for me, the ship can also be exploration. So I'm seeing this as progression and advancement and moving forward. So this is a very positive sign. So it suggests that, you know, if Jonathan finds the inspiration and honors the goal, he will see some advancement. If he also takes the time to recognize the messages and find some way to document them, he will see his progression. It's easier to see your progression when you have documentation of your readings, especially when you see the ones that were accurate and the events that led up to the accuracy. So, but this is a wonderful card. So I'm seeing this as, again, as progression, movement, and moving forward, moving ahead. Very, very nice. So now the next card coming after that is the key. Oh, this is lovely. Okay, so now for me, the key is a yes card. I have two yes cards in the deck. One is the key, which is here, and the other one is the sun card. So whenever I see either one of those cards, very positive sign. And I find it interesting that the key comes at the very end, right before the book, because this is a yes with an exclamation mark. The key represents things like an answer or solution, a breakthrough, a discovery, a revelation, something that is certain. So since it comes at the very end of the line, if Jonathan takes the Lenormand on the advice that it's offering, this card is saying it's a certainty that he's going to become a skilled reader. I'm seeing this as he's going to have a significant breakthrough, or he's going to discover something in the course of his study, in the course of doing the readings, and that's going to be very significant for him. This card is a wonderful card to have. So I'm seeing that regard. So now what we could do is we could look at the cards from the standpoint of my favorite go-to, the line of 5, and what I would normally do with that. So keeping in mind that the stars would become the goal or the ideal, then the ship and the moon could represent honoring the progression, honoring the advancement, recognizing that he is moving forward. And here's the thing about this. Sometimes we can get impatient about our level of progression or advancement. So when I say something like recognizing the progress being made, progress comes in all forms and it comes in all speeds. So even when the progress is slow, it's still progress. So for Jonathan, it's a matter of recognizing the progress. It doesn't have to be something that happens overnight, going with the moon. It makes me feel like, you know, the idea of like we want to be like an overnight sensation. This kind of thing, when you're embarking on this kind of journey, taking on this kind of study, going back to the ship, it's about honoring the journey as well as the destination. The ship, because the ship takes a long time, or it takes some time to get where it's going. And so this would offer Jonathan the idea that this isn't going to be an overnight thing, that it's going to take some time, and to recognize the progress, even small amount progress or slow progress, is still progress. So I'm seeing that with the moon and the ship. And then we have the letter and the key as another pair, and that for me, I'm looking at that is like documentation is key. So it's very important that Jonathan takes the time to actually document or write down his readings. I keep a journal and I record every single Lenormand card reading I've done to this point. And so I know I'm biased, but when I see this as a pair, I'm offering that if you're not already documenting or, you know, keeping a journal, sometimes I see the book as a journal, as well. If you're not keeping some kind of records of your readings, that could be potentially challenging. It'll be difficult to see the progress if you're not keeping record of it. And so I'm thinking that that's important. And you may actually see some kind of discovery or some sort of breakthrough as you're keeping your own records. So I'm seeing that. So that would be how I would read the line. The next thing we could do is look at all the pips that I would normally look at to see if we can uncover some hidden dynamics that we haven't seen in the cards as of yet. So starting with the outer pair, we have the 7 of spades with the letter and the 8 of diamonds with the key. 7 and 8 is 15. And so the 15th card in the deck is the bear. And so the bear, for me, represents power and strength. But in this particular case, in the context of this question, I'm seeing this as a card of resources. So for Jonathan, it's important for him to consider what resources are going to best help him become a stronger, quote unquote, stronger, keeping with the idea of strength, a stronger reader. Also, too, it would be every single one of us, no matter what endeavor we take on, in this case we're talking about reading the Lenormand, every single one of us is going to have our particular area of strength. And so I'm seeing this as advice for Jonathan to look at what makes him a particularly strong reader. What is his strength? And go with that. The other thing I'm seeing with this is that sometimes the bear can represent somebody who is an authoritative figure or a person of influence. So it could be that one of the things that could help Jonathan is finding somebody he considers to be an authority, or somebody he thinks has some sort of influence, or that could be a positive influence on him in terms of his learning to read the cards. And it's very interesting because if I put the bear here, then the bear now is facing the book. So I'm seeing that. The inner pair we have the 8 of hearts with the moon and the 10 of spades with the ship. So 8 and 10 is 18. And the 18th card in the deck, let me find it, here we go, is the dog. So now the dog can represent things like being a friend, a companion, a partner. So one of the things he could do is, if he's at the beginning stage, maybe he can partner with somebody and either practice on them, or if it's another reader, then they could exchange readings. But this card would suggest maybe partnering up with somebody. The other thing I'm seeing is that the dog for me represents things like help and support. So it would be like, what would he need to find that could help him and support him on his study of Lenormand? And if I put the card down here next to the book, then we have the dog facing the book now. So that would be help with his studies, support with his studies, a partner to do readings with. All the things that I've said is very interesting that once you set the card down and you can see the direction, which is why I love direction so much now. The dog is facing the book. The other thing we could do is we could take the pair, and now the pair of bear and dog now becomes helpful and supportive resources, or a helpful and supportive authoritative figure, or a person of influence. Again, the bear is looking to the dog, so now it would be somebody who's in a position of authority on the subject that could better help and support him. And with that, the dog represents somebody he would have to have some affinity to, somebody he felt like he could trust, because that's the other thing about the dog. And the other thing, I keep getting things about the card. The thing about the dog too is like I see things like the guide dog kind of thing. So it would be like resources for guidance, keeping with the stars too. The stars, another guidance card, but this would be like, finding somebody who would be a guide in some shape, form, or fashion to Jonathan. The other thing we can do is we could take the pips of all the cards and add them up together. So I'll do that now. So we have the 7 of spades, we have the 8 of hearts, we have the 6 of hearts, we have the 10, and we have the 8. And so we have 39. And so since we have a total that's more than 36, which is the number of cards in the deck, We're going to take the 3 and the 9, reduce them to 12, and that becomes the owls. And so now, for me, the owls represents communication. And so again, I'm seeing this as maybe one of the things that would be helpful to Jonathan would be talking to someone about the readings. It could be like going from the stage of like, if he's already writing them and documenting them, maybe the next step would be actually talking to someone while doing a reading, because it's one way to do it, writing. It's another way to present the cards talking or verbally. So that could be one of the things. The other thing about the owls is that this is a partnership card. So again, no accidents. Again, it's about forming a partnership with somebody else that would help him. Again, another thing that would be helpful is I sometimes see the owls as being excited about something. So it could be that Jonathan is being asked to find ways that's going to keep him excited about the cards, and not the flip side of the owls, and that's being frustrated with the cards. So, and the other thing too, that maybe one of the challenges with holding conversation is the idea of being nervous. So how can he work through being nervous about talking about the cards? So I'm seeing that as all the information that we can have or glean from the cards from this standpoint. The final thing that we could do that might be helpful for Jonathan is to take the numbers that the cards are assigned and come up with an essence card. So because I always say this in every video, the Lenormand card for me works on 3 levels. It works on the central image, and what information can we get from the central image. It works from the playing card standpoint, and what can we get from that. And then also, what can we get from the number that it's assigned? So what I do is I take all the numbers and add them across. So here we have 27, we have 32, we have 16, we have 3, and we have 33. So the total is 111. And so, again, being over 36, we're going to take the 1 plus 1 plus 1 and add them together, and we get 3. And that brings us right back to the card that's in the line, which is the ship. So, in essence, bottom line here is that to answer Jonathan's question about, becoming a more skilled reader, reading Lenormand, the ship says yes. He could see forward movement, he could see progression, he could see advancement. The other thing about the ship is that this is a journey for him, so he has to appreciate both the journey and the destination, and he has to understand that it's going to take time. So again, the man is Jonathan, the book is the end goal, and we have the letter about documenting the news and messages that he gets from the readings themselves. It could also be with the moon about honoring those messages, recognizing the messages when they come. What kind of creative writing approach could he take that would help him better remember the messages, things of that nature. The stars is all about the ideal or the goal. It's also about maybe exploring things online. Going with the letter, this would be like maybe looking at online blog posts, because the letter is short messages, whereas the book is a longer, a more in-depth source of information. The letter is a shorter, more concise form. So I'm seeing that as maybe looking at what other people are writing about the Lenormand online. That would be helpful for him. So be looking at blog posts, things of that nature. So that's the stars. The ship, again, it's all about movement, progression, advancement, honoring the journey. It's not just about the destination, but honoring the journey. And the key, if this was just the one card that showed up, this is a definite yes, that he could see some skill and advancement. But it's interesting because the key comes after all these other things. So I'm thinking that if you build on all these other things before, that would help in terms of the discovery, the breakthrough, the certainty of becoming a skilled reader. So, Jonathan, I hope this has been helpful in addressing your question. And at some point, it would be fun for you to circle back and let not just myself, but all the viewers know how you are progressing. So again, this has been James and Mitchell. This has been a look with the Lenormand, my take on doing viewer requested readings. And so I hope you found it helpful. I hope you found it informative. And I look forward to sharing this space here again with you in our next video. And until then, take care.